as 5G gets more and more rolled out, we're going to see more and more effects of it. This is why it's been very important to get out as much information as possible, and to continue to do so, about the consequences of 5G. Because although it's being rolled out, if that information wasn't circulating, then people would get consequences of it, but not relate it to 5G, which they would have no idea produce consequences like that. So it's been very important, and continues, like I said, it'd be very important to get this information out so that people can see a cause and effect. Anyway, this is a story from this week. People already hurting from 5G in Geneva, Switzerland. The telecom industry, the article says, it's on activistpost.com, gave US congressional testimony in February that they have no scientific evidence that exposure to 5G technology is safe. They've done no research into it, because they know what they'd find if they do. Plenty of research, however, indicates that it isn't. In outside the industry, that is. In 2017, Swiss doctor Bertrand Buchs launched a petition asking for a moratorium on installation, and many doctors and scientists have already signed it. Worldwide opposition to 5G is growing and includes individuals and organizations concerned about other issues associated with this technology, in addition to biological and environmental risks. Regardless, 5G continues to be installed and operated in the US and around the world, even though it's been reported that people and their pets have been getting sick from exposure. This is now being reported also in Geneva, Switzerland. Thanks to EMF researcher Dr. Bob Moore for posting this on his website. Quote, I spotted an article on the Swiss website, which he mentions, where residents suddenly report about strange side effects they have after the 5G towers have been turned on in Geneva, Switzerland. These residents of the same neighborhood in Geneva suffer from various health problems. Are they victims of a 5G technology whose dangers have not been sufficiently tested anywhere in the world? We are being forcibly radiated by 5G microwaves. 23-year-old Johann Perochild, who was living in Geneva for the past 11 years, says that all problems started in April 2019 when the 5G in Geneva was officially turned on. Suddenly he started having problems falling to sleep because of the stimulation of the brain of the 5G frequency. He felt at home as being like being in a microwave. 3 antennas 5G have just been put into service nearby where he lives, and other people complained of identical disorders and headaches and fatigue. He called Swisscom, who is responsible for 5G antennas being installed in Geneva, and immediately the operator went on to the defensive mode, how everything is tested and perfectly healthy. Well, absolutely. How does someone on the end of a bloody phone, hello? Know any of that? They just know the script they've been given. He claims he had a 2-month sinus infection he has never known before. Also, his neighbor, a 50-year-old called Elidan Arzoni, was no better. On the same date, similar symptoms, more acute, appeared in this person, who is a director of the company Metamorphoses in Geneva. He started to experience strange symptoms like tinnitus, constantly ringing in the ears, and at the same time he felt strong pain on the left side of the head and behind the skull. He was also worried he had a heart attack because his heart was beating so fast, which is something that also been associated with 5G, because the heart beats through electrical pulses. And any frequency that interferes with that is going to affect the heart. Dr. Buchs was also interviewed, and he said, I meet more and more with similar problems. In the absence of clear studies, we do not have the right to answer to these people that they are imaginary patients. With the shorter waves of the 5G, no one knows what can happen, not to mention their potentiation, that is to say their mixture with 3G, 4G and Wi-Fi. Geneva authorities are going against common sense. The precautionary principle is clearly violated. Why in just 2 months so many antennas, 100 today in Switzerland, are appearing? While for any drug we spend years testing whether the drug is good or bad. But like I say, the reason that they're not testing is because they know what the tests will reveal, and they certainly don't want to do that in any public arena. Otherwise, the truth will out. Now, where shall we go next? Oh, let's go here. Trump administration says it won't approve Roundup cancer warning labels. You know, it really needs to dawn on the supporters of Trump that this guy is not a messiah and a savior. He's a puppet. And one of the puppets he's a puppet of is the global corporations. And so he's constantly making decisions that support the interests of corporations, because the man's obsessed with money. The Trump administration has told companies not to warn customers about products that contain glyphosate or glyphosate, a decision targeted at a California regulation that requires labels to warn consumers that the Roundup ingredient is potentially cancer-causing. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency says it will no longer approve labels warning glyphosate or glyphosate is known to cause cancer. The chemical, marketed by as a weed killer by Monsanto, lovely people, under the brand Roundup, is currently the focus of lawsuits from thousands of consumers alleging it caused their cancers. Such labels are irresponsible, the Environmental Protection Agency administrator. Yes, you read that right, or I did. You heard that right. Such labels are irresponsible, warning people about the dangers of Roundup. Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Andrew Wheeler said in a statement, he cited the EPA's conclusions that the chemical doesn't represent a cancer risk. The decision from the EPA highlights the growing debate over the safety of glyphosate or glyphosate, with scientific research often reaching contradictory conclusions. Well, depending on whether it's independent or whether it's funded by the industry. So the evidence that Roundup is dangerous to health is overwhelming. Of course, Monsanto is now owned by Bayer, one of the constituent parts of IG Farben that ran the concentration camp at Auschwitz. Again, you know, more lovely people. And for Trump to do that just shows very clearly where he is coming from. And I mentioned about Trump being obsessed with money. And one of the stories that's come to light this week is that Trump wants to buy Greenland. Because it's only money, you see. Oh, you got this land, people live there, okay, we want to buy it. It's like a monopoly board to this man, and people like him. We're not for sale. Greenland's foreign minister fires back at reports Trump toyed with the idea of buying Greenland, and it's gone on to continue this story with spokespeople for Trump talking about, well, Greenland's got lots of valuable minerals. It's just unbelievable. The man's barely one-dimensional, and yet he's seen as this messiah. It's extraordinary. Greenland's foreign minister has responded to reports that US President Donald Trump discussed purchasing the autonomous Danish territory remarking that the land or the island wasn't for sale. We are open for business, but not for sale, he said. So this is the mentality you're dealing with, that money is everything. And of course, money is created out of nothing, so it's not even generated by anything really. It's generated by printing it or creating it on screens. And if you control that, then you can go around purchasing the world with money that has not, does not, and will never exist, basically called credit. Now, one other story, which kind of fits in with what I was talking about with Monsanto. Johnson & Johnson found to have knowingly allowed asbestos in their baby powder. I was warned a long time ago about how dangerous talcum powder was. And it's since come out that what I was told is absolutely accurate. And the story says, we are starting to awaken to the fact that it seems to be the rule and not the exception that large Western corporations put profits above human health considerations, because humanity is just cattle to them. They're just a herd in a field to be exploited and abused for the interests of the few. That's the point. Once you get that mindset in your head, suddenly what these corporations do makes perfect sense. Like Johnson & Johnson. Appalling and appalling. The only time they seem to give any regard to human health concerns is when their forecasts of potential lawsuits down the road would likely exceed the cost measures needed to ensure the safety of their product. Quite right. Johnson & Johnson is just one of a long line of corporations, perpetrators, who believe that covering up and lying about known health concerns would make better business sense than taking the time and resources to actually address those health concerns within their products. Now, sometimes that is true. Many times that is true. But there's also another level of it, and 5G is a classic, whereby you do know absolutely what the effects are on humanity, but you're not covering it up just to make money. You're covering it up because you want those effects to happen. Like I say, 5G is a classic of that. One would think, regardless of an understanding that the bottom line is priority for most private companies, that the health and safety of a nursing mother and a newborn child would be sacrosanct for any industry. No way. We're dealing with psychopaths. The reality is that this is simply not the case, even though Johnson & Johnson could have mitigated this problem from the start. Companies that mine talc are required to take extra steps to ensure the absence of asbestos in their talc. Instead, Johnson & Johnson allegedly went to great lengths to fake it. And it's not just that it's got the asbestos side of it. You're breathing in this powder, and your baby is breathing in this powder into the lungs. With or without asbestos, what effect do you think that's going to have on the functioning of the lungs? With asbestos, well, we know from experience what that does. Not only did the company know that the asbestos contamination was there, evidence suggests that Johnson & Johnson also failed to warn its customers about the link between baby powder and cancer or replace its talc with a safer alternative. As a result, Johnson & Johnson guaranteed its customers exposure to asbestos. And regardless of their size or numbers, asbestos fibers are lethal in any capacity. As the World Health Organization has stressed repeatedly, there is no safe level of exposure. So When you understand the mentality that's behind the corporations, you start to understand the mentality that's behind the cabal that directs the destination of the world. And humanity has been so incredibly naive and unattentive on what these corporations and this network are and want to create, that they've been allowed to get away with it. But we are in a different era now, increasingly. And we are at a turning point where this is going to start to unravel. And in terms of what's happening with Epstein, that's part of the unraveling. And what has to unravel first is the unraveling of incredulity in the public mind at how extreme these people can act and how extreme these people are. Once that penny drops, everything else follows.